with Isabella Milano. Un momento. Un momento.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Un Momento with Isabella Milano. I am so pleased to be introducing my guest, Wendy Nielsen, an accomplished soprano and educator. Mrs. Nielsen has been teaching voice for over 25 years and continues to lead a nationally reputable summer opera program in St. Andrews, New Brunswick, which revolves around the artistic process for young opera singers. In 2012, Wendy joined the University of Toronto Faculty of Music. After working as head of the voice area from 2015 to 2020, she is now associate professor for the teaching stream in voice and opera. Wendy is also currently the head vocal consultant for the Canadian Opera Company Ensemble Studio, where she provides her expertise and advocates for the autonomy of singers and their instruments. Please join me in welcoming the incredible Wendy Nielsen.
Thanks, Isabella. Thank you.
So my first question, I know that looking into your website and some of the things that you're doing, even before meeting you at U of T, I saw that your career as an opera singer first began to take off in 1994. So what advice would you give your young opera singer self today?
Oh, that's a tricky one. It's such a different place and time. I think I would reinforce for myself that I am enough, that even though I'm from a small town in Canada, that my artistic opinions and impressions have value, as much value as the next person. I think I had a slight inferiority complex, thinking, because I grew up in a small town on the East Coast, that I hadn't been exposed to a lot of live music at a high level. But I had some excellent training there. And so I think that I guess that's the advice I give that I do know things and good instincts.
Yes, I think that's so important going into really any field of study and career-wise, just to know that you have your own set of skills and that everyone brings something to the table. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you can learn things, but to have to trust your instincts, to trust your own emotions. To thine own self be true.
Exactly. Yes. Especially as performers.
Especially as performers. An audience can smell insincerity like that.
Speaking of performing, how does working at the Canadian Opera Company compare to your time as an instructor at U of T? And how has both of kind of the contrast between working at these two places as a performer changed how you've taught and how you've gone about your own personal career?
That's a really interesting question. I think for me, back in 2012, when the current dean at U of T and Alexander Neef offered me the position, that said, would you move to Toronto and take on these two roles? I mean, what a gift, first of all. I just was kind of stunned. It's been so fantastic. They are two quite different jobs. I hadn't worked, honestly, I worked a little bit in the summers with an undergraduate age group, but not as much as I'd worked with, let's say, 23 and up. So when I first started at U of T, I was quite nervous about teaching undergraduates, actually, because that was not a group of singers or an age group that I was necessarily had spent a lot of time with. And I think undergraduate is so formative. And thankfully here at U of T, there are many, many performing courses with different languages, as you know, Isabella, yourself, now that you're here at U of T. So it's a very dense program. So I learned a lot in my first few years about what an undergraduate needs in terms of support and technique. So that was my learning curve. I had been a member of the COC ensemble. So I knew what that program was at that time. Of course, everything changes. It was different leadership, but I remember how crucial it was for me. And I think it gave me a certain kind of credibility with the singers there because they knew I had been along this path as well. So that, I think that continues to be useful, even though now at 60, I'm quite far removed from the age group that's in the ensemble right now. But, you know, for example, one of the members just recently got engaged. And so we were discussing family life and decisions about how to balance career and professional life. And with this singer, I was saying I was actually expecting my son my last year in the ensemble. And that was a priority for me. I knew I wanted to have a family, and I didn't want to wake up and be in the middle of a career and go, oh, I forgot to have a family, because that's a priority for me. It's not a priority for everybody. So that's always a nice bonus of that teaching. In addition to teaching them, this I guess would fall more under mentorship or professional mentorship, perhaps. I'm not sure I've exactly answered your question.
I think that you definitely talked a lot about the parts of teaching and mentorship that are overlooked but are yet so important to the performer and so individual to everyone's path. And
absolutely,
I think that brings also into kind of my next question, because the nice thing and the wonderful thing about you as a teacher, Wendy, is you always go above and beyond. You have a reputation for going above and beyond to get to know your students and to teach them how to navigate not only their instrument, but also the various parts of what makes up a performer's life and the dimensions that makes up, you know, their personhood and what they bring to their art. So can you tell me what you felt were some of the more important things that you saw in yourself and in other artists that you've worked with, for them, like qualities that they possess that really helped them get through to where they wanted to go?
I think an openness to learn. I think if you enjoy working on yourself, if you enjoy working on fine detail, and that you're stimulated and fed by that on your own, I mean, this job of being an opera singer, a classical singer, or probably any singer, actually, any kind of repertoire, there's a lot of time spent alone in a practice room. You know this. And, you know, sometimes I think people see the glamorous parts, like, oh, the performances and the after parties and I mean, that's good fun, but that's really quite a small part of the actual job. And I remember there's a colleague of mine at McGill, Michael McMahon, who we were talking about singers and just sort of just what your question is getting at. And every once in a while, Michael would say, I think that singer is in love with the idea of being a singer, which I thought, oh, that's so interesting. So they were kind of in love with the idea of perhaps the attention. I mean, and let's be honest, we all began singing at some point because it got us attention. Mm-hmm. As a little kid, people were like, hey, you've got a good voice. I'm like, really? Oh, okay. That was a great thing. Yeah. And you get some attention and people like it and people are moved by it. That's all, I think, healthy and normal. But I think if you're going to go into this field as a professional, there has to be more than just that. And you need to be in love with the art form and in love with the kind of little tinkering you do to get your E vowel better so that the aria goes better and you can be more expressive, like all of the behind the scenes work that has to happen before you step on the stage.
Yes.
So I think that's really important, that people understand, you know, what is the job of a singer? And your audience should never know the hours that you spent translating and getting the rhythm and reading the backstory on the composer, all those things, because they should just enjoy the song. But when you do all that work, all that layering of work, much like a painting that has layers, you see the external, but all those layers contribute to the final result. And I think being a lifelong learner is an important thing for a musician, for any artist, that you enjoy finding out new things about the art form and about yourself and your own artistry. Yeah, I think those are kind of the key things. And the other thing that that might be useful to your listeners that I think is that I really feel like there are 5 things that a singer has to have. So I always think like 5 glasses, right? So one glass is the voice glass, and that's just what you were given, right? What you got in your throat and your face shape, and that was just like, you have brown eyes and you have those little vocal cords in your throat, right? That's a gift, the voice glass. And then and that's also very subjective. Some people have different kinds of voices. The musicianship glass, that's skill, but it's also like good sense of rhythm, ear for a melody. So the musicianship glass. The language glass, if you're in classical Western music, the language glass is crucial. You need to sound like you speak Italian, even if you don't. The acting glass, the ability to convey emotion, right, through your singing. And again, another learned skill, but some people are much more adept at that. I myself, took me a while to join up my love of singing with being expressive with my face and body. I was kind of a bit awkward at first. And then the 5th class is that sort of je ne sais quoi, that kind of, that sort of, I'll say, star quality, that when someone starts to perform, you're like, oh, that's really interesting. You can't really say what it is, but you know it when you hear it or you see it. You're like, oh, they're really anchored. They're being, all those little factors are all combined. Yeah. So I think that those are the 5 glasses.
That's fascinating. I know that we talked a lot about the workstation and what goes on in the workstation with your teacher and by yourself, and all that, how many different layers it takes to
Yes.
make one performance happen, and to really.
And then of course, like any learned skill, it all starts to make a bigger snowball, and if things start rolling faster and you're learning things more quickly, and you can get to the artistic layer more quickly in your German song because your German's gotten better, all those things.
Yeah, that's when you get really excited about what next, what else you can really draw from.
Exactly.
I know you are obviously a very talented teacher, but also a friend to many people from around the globe. Looking back on some of your achievements, what are some career highlights or travel highlights that you have that you'd like to share with us? I always love asking.
So many things. Certainly my Met debut was a big career sort of arrival and departure point. So that was in 1996 when I was 34, and I'd been out of the ensemble program for about 5 years by then. So I had sung at some other companies and got this opportunity. So that was really, it was a real seal of approval, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, I sang at the Met. Yeah. So I sang there for 12 seasons. So that was really exciting. I've traveled to a lot of different places. The Great Wall of China was very cool. I was there singing Mahler's Second Symphony, and there's a mezzo soloist and a soprano soloist. And the mezzo soloist was from Poland, and she was about my height, very blonde and blue-eyed. And they took us to see the Great Wall of China. And there were lots of other families there, mostly Asian families. And we were as much of an attraction as the Great Wall. And one family kind of got screwed up their courage, and they came over and asked us if we'd be in the photo with them. And we were like, okay. So we're somewhere. And then everybody wanted us. It's just because we were so tall.
Yes, I can imagine the height.
So tall. And these females, they had no idea that we were it wasn't like we were famous or anything. So we laughed and laughed that we're going to be in the vacation photos of all of these. Like, what's with the giants on the Great Wall of China? So that was quite fun. I think artistically and personally, one of a big moment for me was in my home province of New Brunswick. Oh, it's right behind me. I can show you. I don't know if you can see it with the glare.
Oh, this is New Brunswick.
A photo of a stage. It's called the Imperial Theatre. It's in St. John, New Brunswick, near where I grew up. And they had an opera company there, small opera company, and they asked me if I would come and do something. And I was like, I don't know, they'd done some sort of community theater type level. And I was like, well, I wasn't sure. Like I wanted to, but I wasn't sure what I was getting myself into, honestly. But I was keen to sing Tosca, and they said, what would you like to sing? And I said, if you hire a professional director and conductor, I will happily come and do this. And they did. And so there were a lot of friends and family and lots of people I knew in New Brunswick who'd never been to an opera before, because it's a small province. And this Opera New Brunswick, they were putting on opera, but like I say, to have the sort of professional level consistent throughout. So that was really fun for me to, and that would have been, probably like 6 years after my Met debut. Wow. So that was really meaningful. It's a beautiful, the little photo, you can't tell from the photo, but it's a beautiful little theater there, like a European type opera house. So that was great.
I'll have to visit that. That sounds so nice. I mean, after all the traveling, I can imagine how special that was to just have.
It really was. And to have, one of my brothers had never seen me in an opera before, so that was great that he was there. And, because I was traveling a lot, that people couldn't always go. If my husband were here, he'd tell you that one of the career highlights was being on the tray liner of a McDonald's.
Tell me about that. That's so interesting.
So I have it framed at home. So I was singing, I was about to sing Micaela in Carmen at the Met, but I hadn't sung it anywhere else. They had offered, I'd sung Fior di Gin Così fan tutte, and that this was the second role they offered me. And my manager's like, what do you think? And I was like, I'm sure I can sing it. But so they wanted to find another place for me to sing it before I sang the Met. Kind of a good idea. And so they found this concert version that one of their conductors on their roster was doing. And it was in Wheeling, West Virginia. And they had a nice little symphony there, nice little town. Wheeling's really well known for country music. We actually performed in the same place where they do this amazing country show. Anyway, so we get there. It's meant to be one performance, concert style, in front of the orchestra. And often, so you'd always get, for my manager, I get a little sheet of paper, this is the flight you're on. These are the rehearsals. These are your colleagues. This is where you're staying. Just a little sheet of paper. Blah, 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 blah. So sometimes there are donor events, right? You're going to go do this thing, but they want you to meet with some of the donors of the symphony later, or you're going to maybe do an outreach to a school or something like that. Sometimes those sorts of things happen. Mm-hmm. So it said, McDonald's, 5 p.m. And I thought, that's the name of the donor. So it turns out that it was a real McDonald's. So this guy in Wheeling owned a McDonald's, and he had a grand piano in it. And he had jazz nights at the McDonald's on Friday nights. So we took over jazz night, and I was singing at 5 o'clock while people are ordering their Big Macs and their fries. We're up there with the grand piano singing arias from Carmen. But they had us, our photos were printed on the tray liners.
Oh my, wow.
No, made it win. It was quite fun.
That sounds like such an incredible story for parties, for everything.
It's one of my husband's favorite ones. Yeah.
That's phenomenal. So you often traveled with your husband to all these places?
Sometimes. When our son was little, before he was in school, for those 5 or 6 years, they would come. My husband was a stay-at-home dad. Oh, nice. So yeah, so that facilitates some of that. But once our son was in school, he had his life and his routine, and so sometimes they would come, but they wouldn't come for a contract. An opera contract is often a month to 6 weeks. So,
Wow. Well, that is wonderful. Oh my goodness. I'll have to do this again. I know you have so many more stories. Those are all the questions I have.
Wind her up, and you can't get me stopped.
It was great. I mean, thank you so much, Wendy, for
It's a
taking the time
pleasure.
to speak with me and to teach us all a little bit more about your story. It was just an honor and a privilege to have you on the show. So, for more information for everyone watching about Wendy Nielsen, you can visit www.wendynielsen.ca. This has been Un Momento with Isabella Milano and Wendy Nielsen. See you next time. Bye.
Un